you can become ambidextrous. And look, the reality is you're not going to be writing or drawing or performing really intricate tasks with your other hand, your non-dominant one, as good as with your main, unless you pretty much spend like 10 years on it. But you can become ambidextrous to a point where your opposite hand is actually really good. There's two major parts of this I notice, is that when you use your non-dominant hand, you'll find that essentially the meridian lines, the kind of tactile lines of force which run through the whole body, you'll feel them being stimulated, and you'll notice in the non-dominant hand that they are weaker. Specifically, I notice because the left hand is more related to the head and the heart, I notice my left area of the brain kind of really being like, it gets stimulated and tensed and all that kind of stuff, right? With the right hand, it's more related to the lower body, the earth. So a person who's dominant in the right hand, you would assume them to be more kind of physical, earthly. That's why they teach you usually with the right hand, is because it makes you more stable, and it makes you more, some people say, oh, well, it's control. And it's like, well, I don't really know about that. And then the left hand is more creativity and all this kind of stuff, because it's, heart, it's positive energy, right? The heart and the head. That's why I say left-handed people are more creative. I knew a few left-handed people in my day back at like school. Once you leave school, I guess no one really talks about it or cares about it. And I always wondered, are they pretending? It's a bit like, I guess, homosexuality, where it's like they kind of want to be different and unique and all that, and then like eventually they psyop themselves into it being, just what they do almost. I've always thought that with a left-handed person, it's like, oh, you just want to be special. You just want to be unique. But maybe that's wrong. Maybe it does depend on your elemental makeup. What hand is dominant to you? For me, I've always felt my right hand was my dominant one. I don't know if that's a shock or if that's seemingly obvious. Even though I've been a very I've definitely had periods of my life of great creativity and lots of that heart energy, but I guess I am rooted into the the negative elements, and of course, and that's probably a good thing. As a man, you kind of have to be very stable. And the left-handed people I've known they are fairly creative. I've enjoyed being around them. They have that special, they do have a feeling to them. They do have a certain feeling to them, which is nice to be around in a way. But they do smudge their ink, unfortunately. That's one thing they always tell me, is that they you got to lift the hand. And I guess that's the thing. Again, the left hand should be light, like heaven, like hot air, and the right hand is like lead or brick or clay or something, because it's heavy, it's negative, right? So anyway, I'm talking about too much nonsense. The first time I really saw this is when I was working on a trade site, right? And there were a bunch of tradies, and usually tradesmen just talk about how they blow all their money on. You will never believe how much alcohol these guys drink. I mean, like, you think you've seen people who drink. We've all been to parties and there's someone drinking a whole bottle of, like a litre bottle of hard spirit. I mean, these tradesmen put those people to shame, the amount of like bottles of beer or wine, my goodness. So it's either they're talking about like alcohol, television shows, or whoring. They really like that. They blow a lot of money on it. Complete waste. But sometimes you will get some real conversation from these guys. Some like really intelligent shit. And one time they were talking about ambidexterity, and they were really proud of it, and they all seemingly had that ability of being kind of ambidextrous. And they said it's because they would switch their hand, like they'd get tired with their right hand, you know, drilling or digging or welding or whatever, and then they'd use their left hand. And then they'd go back to their right hand, right? And they all had this ability to do that, and I would notice as they would work that they would do that. And I was younger and I didn't really have that ability, you know, yet. So what I did, just because I don't know, I thought it was interesting, I would practice with weird writing with like my pinky finger or my ring finger, or different, like, you know, doing weird things to stimulate other parts of my hands, right? And eventually I practiced doing stuff with my left hand. And what you can do for fine motor controls, you can write and draw. And you can just practice moving your left hand around like Tai Chi, or just like natural movements, right? And your fingers and all this kind of stuff. Just to practice. But one really important thing is exercise, actually. I found just naturally by exercise, which is kind of my hypothesis of why the tradesmen were so ambidextrous, is because they simply just did a lot of exercise. They just lifted a lot of shit, right? What I find is that the non-dominant side of your body, of course, is going to be weaker. Though, in saying that, usually the right leg is going to be stronger than the left leg. The left arm and like pectoral and all that kind of stuff might be more muscular than the left. Same way as the sides of the face. One side looks older and one looks younger. One's more developed. I noticed the left side of my face is more like my beard grows more, right, than my right side. I think because there's more blood flow, more stimulation and growth happening there. But if you exercise your body, you lift your weight, you do your bench press, your curls, your pull-ups, push-ups, all that, you know, for the arms, you do your squats and such, you're going to get stronger. And if you make sure to be equal with your left and your right arms, they're both going to get stronger. Then, so you have to build up the physical strength in the body. Then you need to build up the mind. You need to, because subconsciously we use our body, right? Naturally, you just know how to write and how to, I don't know, maybe you're doing your chores, you're cooking and cleaning, or using the computer, or driving, or, you know, riding a bike or walking, or whatever. We naturally know these things. When you have to use your mind to enter your non-dominant arm and hand, it's going to be a new experience, right? It's going to be different and weird, and it's going to feel weird. What I try to do is I try to delegate some tasks to my non-dominant hand, my left hand. For example, when I wash the dishes, the drying rack is towards the right of me. So I use my left hand to scrub the plates and the cups and all these things, right? And then I use my right hand to grab it and put it on the drying rack. Depending, sometimes I do the opposite. In the morning when I brush my hair, I brush it with my left hand to force me to use my left hand. Because the more you use it, the better you get. And you'll be surprised how bad you are when you first start, but how, you know, you can get a lot better. And it is a good thing, I think, at least, because when you can use both hands at the same time, what happens is that, you know, you're focusing on two different things at the same time, and you'll feel like your brain stimulating in a strange way, and your body stimulating, and all these kinds of things, and you're able to do things so much more efficiently. You're not just this one armed. I'm imagining like it's kind of like the Kuma meme with like the giant right arm and the crippled little left arm, you know, some like goblin who just has one giant arm swinging off his torso, and then the rest of him is just this little crippled, weak thing, right? It's good, and it stimulates both sides of you, because you want to find that like harmony within you, that equalness within you, to balance your own elements. And part of that is learning to use different hands, right? So you'll unlock new parts of yourself if you do this. If you just say you're a left-hand dominant person, there's a whole world out there that you haven't explored, assuming you haven't just lied about it because you wanted to be special, which is a very heart-centered person thing. I'm not stupid, I'm onto you. I can see through your lies. I'm partially joking. Or if you're a right-hand-centered person, you know, maybe you're a bit too mundane or whatever. Maybe not. Maybe you're like me and you weren't mundane, which maybe led me to use my left hand. I don't know. But there's a whole other world out there. And, you know, you're going to unlock, like, memories, and you're going to unlock new abilities, and it's just important to do it, I think. So, you know, start today, do some practices of just moving your non-dominant hand around and your arm around, right? Do some exercises to strengthen it, and then start putting tasks to it. You know, just basic chores like unscrew a bottle with your other hand, you know, pour a drink or something, or try to cook some food, or, you know, just try to do simple things at first. You know, stir, learning to stir, to go around in a circle. Do you notice that it's not always like, it's not as good? It's a bit like jacking off with, you know, one of your hands is going to feel better than the other, because you've got that muscle memory. And of course, I guess the way that your internal or external appendage kind of, you know, works and twists and turns to, it's gonna, you know, one way is gonna be better. But yeah, I don't know, give it a shot. It's interesting because it's like everything is special, right? Once you understand that this is what there is, this is kind of all that there is, it's like everything that is becomes more special. And you being able to use both your hands and arms and legs, sides of the brain, is important. So if you don't have that ability yet, develop it. Anyway, that's all for this one. Of course, have a good day, and check links in the description for social commercial stuff, and goodbye. Alright, so Christmas. Now, if you look at a lot of the symbolism of it, it relates to, I believe, to Northern Europe, the idea of reindeers, and the Christmas tree is a pine tree, and under the pine tree, once it becomes like wet enough, what you get are amanita mushrooms, and they're not psychedelic or anything. People think they're like magic mushrooms, maybe if you poison yourself on them, but they're actually more of like a vitality mushroom, if anything. So the gift, and of course the red and the white colouring, and potentially the green, would come from the tree. So the gifts under the tree, and I guess maybe, I don't know, people use these for, you know, whatever holy ceremonies. I think they mixed it into other, specifically the religious kind of wizardly folk. I think they mixed it into other things as well, because I guess it would help for that. But anyway, it's a bit like, you know, in the peak of winter, at the solstice of it, people start burning things like the candles and the lights, and it's like the idea of you've built up all of this stuff, and you burn the light to keep the darkness away, to keep the evil away, and such. And you have like your festival, a bit like the Saturnalia festival in Rome and Roman times, right? The lights, I would say, relate probably to the stars, because of course in winter, in the darkness, you know, when the night is very, you know, a very long night, you're going to see the stars. Also, one interesting thing is the globes. You know, all the globes on the trees are like lights and all that, and the tree representing the North Star, the North Pole. the center of the world, so to speak. But also, there's, I think, maybe an idea of like Mercury globes, because alchemists would figure out how to get mercury to glow. And of course, we use mercury vapor in lights to get them to glow. And if you look at a mercury arc rectifier, it produces this beautiful blue glow. Maybe there's some kind of occultic connotation with the snow globes and all, and the globes on a tree relating to glowing mercury balls, which would have been on top of buildings, and in the dark they would have glown. Who knows? That's a hypothesis of mine. I like the Christmas time. I like the Halloween and the Christmas and all that, because autumn and winter, very nice seasons, of course. Here we have Christmas in summer, which is a little bit weird. Imagine people trying to rush and shop and all that stuff, and it's hot and the sun's beating down on you and all that, which maybe is probably better than it being snowing and cold. I don't know. But of course, Saturn is the major archetype and the major character of Christmas. Santa is Saturn and Saturn is Satan. Now, we're not looking at this from someone's traumatized grandma's lens of Christianity. We're looking at it from a lens of what is. And of course, Saturn is the planet Saturn. And the archetype of Saturn is that of materialism, material matter, the earth, the ground, minerals and such. Which is why Christmas is a materialistic holiday, which is a good thing. It's good that we have a materialistic holiday. And of course, there's materialistic qualities to all holidays. Easter, you give away chocolate. Halloween, you give away candy and such. But of course, Christmas is, presents, and I think that's a good thing. It's nice to just say, if you have someone you love or you have a family, I think it's good that you're able to give them things, and maybe they even give you things. And we share around this materialism and money and gifts and all this kind of stuff. And that is Saturn. Saturn is the bones. It is lead. You notice that a lot of lead oxide, lead carbonate, all these lead compounds are white, and the bones are white. And calcium is also a Saturnian substance. Of course, we use calcium for the mortar to connect bricks together, where you get nice white kind of color from the calcium oxide when you burn it enough. Ashes in general relate to this Saturnian nature, and one thing to understand the world is you can look at it and see the top of the world is God. It is a ball of light that is ever giving and ever expanding and ever taking, and it's just this energy that is just constantly radiating on everything. And at the bottom of the world is, the devil, so to speak, the darkness, the Saturn force. And it's just this ever-consuming and compressing and coagulating and forming sphere. And again, we don't want to look at it from like a case of good or evil. Of course, the quote-unquote archetypally, the light is good and the darkness is evil, if you do want to understand the good and evil force. But I'm trying to we don't want to, people love to get into trauma when you talk about religion, so I don't really want to go that way, because at the end of the day, if you want an esoteric idea of Satan, it simply just is, the force of materialism and such. If you take away, people read all these stories and have all these hallucinations about things. It's like a bunch of nonsense. But that's what it is. And in the body, the Saturnian force is the bowels and the bones, the base of the body. The north is the down. Usually we think of north as up. I guess it depends where you live. And technically the south is up. The south is the heat. It's the hot lands. and such, and the Firelands, and the north is the earth, the earthen world, and the northern Europe, basically, is the icy, cold, mountainous, like the top parts of Russia and the Nordic, like Scandinavia, Finland, I think Norway and such. If I got my European geography right, it's these kinds of places, and of course, the idea of white, pale white, elvish-looking alien people that come from the north, and they come down and they give, it's like the idea of the elves making treasures up in the north. It would be these hyper-advanced, elf-like looking alien white people who made all this crazy technology and came down, and that's why everyone has all these alien stories, or in their religions, they talk about like a white prophet, or, probably because of this. So there's a lot of history you can look into there. But anyway, really just to summarize it, it is, of course, as you probably already know, the festival of the winter solstice, which is Saturn's time. It is time of Earth, time to rest, and to relax and store and tap into your stores of things. If you canned stuff or you prepared stuff, you'd start tapping into it, and that's kind of Christmas, is that let's open the cellar, let's open that, and let's start burning all some of the wood we've stored away. Let's have a little bit of a festival to keep away the darkness and the depression and all that in the winter. Of course, do enjoy your Christmas, Merry Christmas, and hopefully I don't know, maybe you're too old to get gifts, but maybe hopefully someone gave you a gift. Otherwise, enjoy the gift of knowledge and the gift of solitude, maybe, and peace that you have. And anyway, that's about it. So have a good day and goodbye. So I think people are subconsciously nostalgic for village life. And really, a village was a place where essentially everyone is your family. It's similar in a way to a clan. It's maybe an unofficial clan, because a clan is more, you have a family which makes lots of children, which make lots of families, and they're all under the same kind of structure and hierarchy. And I think a village is a little more disordered than that, where you've got a bunch of people who are very genetically similar in a way that essentially everyone is cousins in some sense or matter, and they all start to look like each other because they all live in the same area and village. So everyone marries one another, and they all work together, and they all live in the same kind of area, like actual space of dirt and such, right? I think we have this situation in first world countries where the countries are so big and complicated that a lot of the stuff is delegated to the governments, and the governments have become giant and bloated, and we've given too much money to them, but no one's happy. See, that's the problem. No one's really happy, because even if you go to town and someone's misbehaving, legally you're not allowed to walk up to that person and beat them in the head, because at the end of the day, the only thing that's going to stop most of these people is, we're not allowed to say it, but essentially is the use of some kind of violence or some kind of traumatization. And of course, jail is a form of traumatization, locking someone up, isolating them, beating them, socially ostracizing. Of course, if you do something weird, people look at you strangely, and this kind of makes you think, oh, well, maybe am I doing something wrong? Look, point being is that people need to be disciplined if they're doing something wrong. And I mean, fundamentally wrong. Violence, antisocial behavior, the use of drugs, and it's just acting out improperly and such. And we can't really do this because the law keeping, I mean, you can kind of try to, but law keeping has been delegated to the police, and of course the police are under the government. Similarly, if something breaks, like there's a pothole or there's some kind of, I don't know, a gas leak or a water leak in the city, that has been delegated to council workers and trades workers and such that work under them. So everything is very it's very out of your control. While in the village, if I don't know, there was a big hole in one of the roads, you could fix it. Of course, you would have, there would be the people that would usually fix certain things. There would be the people who would usually be working medicinally, to help people with the illnesses and such. And that's how everyone gets their little craft and trade. And you have the local carpenter and such. But of course, if you saw something, the village belongs to everyone. Well, now the town technically belongs to the council and the government, and it's behind so much paperwork and all this complexity, which is not exactly good for people, their health or mental health, I think, because you have things which just don't get fixed, and you're not allowed to fix them, because the same way you'll have some degenerate or drug addict or something that looks like a little gremlin or a ghoul, harassing people, and you can't, grab their head and pretend that the pavement is sandpaper, because you'll be the one who is, the evil one at that point, at least under the law. So really all I'm saying is, it's difficult to take anything into your own hands, and it's difficult to feel pride about something being yours. It's like if you make something, you know everything about it. You can fix it if it breaks. You have full responsibility of it. I guess it's like when people have children and the children are obviously doing bad things. In a current society, you can't really discipline them. Well, in the village, you could, because the chances are they were the child of your sister or your cousin or someone you knew, and there's more interaction there. So I guess this is really an issue in, first world white countries, because with advancement, but also the way I see it, it's kind of been put on us. It's a bit like, here's an interesting thing. We give all this power and money to the government and expect them to fix things, but they don't. What do you do then? Of course, you have to fix your own problems. But one really big thing is, of course, the issue with dating and marriage in today's society. The amount of men who are virgins and the amount of women who are childless and unmarried. For the millennials and Gen Z, it's insane just how many there are. And that's a legitimate problem. If I were, the ruler of a country or a domain or whatever, I would see that as problem number one. You don't have people that are having children, and they're not forming healthy relationships, right? And of course, the family is the most important part of society. The family revolves around society, because if you're not having children, that's it, you're done. It doesn't matter that you build a bridge, that's nice, but you don't have anyone to perpetuate that bridge building technique or whatever it happens to be, right? So instead we get a bunch of immigrants, and they use it, of course, as a justification for this. But at the end of the day, it's a bit like, why would you ship all the work overseas and then bring a bunch of people here? Isn't that contradictory? Of course it is, to destabilize first world white countries, what you call a Western country. Going on, so wouldn't you, if you were the government or something, see that as an issue and be like, hey, how about we fix the relationship issues? So essentially, because we're giving them all this power and money and influence and authority. Again, it's like a parent. It's like you have to get approval from the parent before you do something, because we're treated like a child. The same way in the society or the town, you're not allowed to just fix things or discipline people, because it's that stuff's delegated to all these forces. But what happens when you have these glaringly big issues that no one's fixing? The people delegated to probably fix it don't exist, or if they do, it's just a tax scam, like at things that harvest money. And then, of course, you have to take it into your own hands. And that's why I see in the future, it'll kind of be like some people will want more government protection, control and all that, and they'll just be systematized into the ground, and other people don't, because it's just not working. And that's when you have people buying land, like rural land, and making their own villages again, and civilizations and societies and such, which I think is going to be, it's just going to be a thing. Of course, there is also the idea of, I think people just function better. Like, you will live a happier life probably if you marry someone who is very similar to you, even genetically. I think people were just happier that way. And, the idea of arranged marriages and such, chances are the person they arranged the marriage to was either a cousin or a second cousin or a third cousin, and that kept things stable and functional for, forever. Of course, women have the desire where they want, hypergamy essentially is the woman wants to marry the king or the boss or the biggest, strongest, greatest, whatever, right? And men have the desire to be the best, greatest, strongest, the boss, the ruler, the whatever, so he can get a bunch of women. And of course that functionally doesn't work. If you have the guy who's the greatest, who has all the women, that guy can only do so much, he can only build so much, right? And the society doesn't function because you don't have anyone building infrastructure, and you're going to have a bunch of children that, where are they going to live? What are they going to eat? So instead we have the idea of monogamy. And men, of course, their dissatisfaction comes from that they don't have a whole harem of women. They don't have that variety, that kind of excitement, right? And women's dissatisfaction is that they don't have the greatest guy, the most kind of alpha, the most strongest guy, right? The most high in the hierarchy. And this is kind of like, what would you say? It's like the grass is greener, or there are issues that come with this, of course. This isn't a video about dating, but just to summarize it, the idea of having a harem, you're going to have a lot of money to, and you're going to have a lot of strength to defend all those women. And then to manage all that, it's a bit of a headache, right? So the fantasy isn't as good as the reality. Well, with the woman, that guy who's, a super Chad, he's gonna, why should he just care about you? He's gonna have a lot of women, right? Like, those kinds of guys are usually, they're very stimulated, they're on to the next thing, on to the next woman, they're doing a whole bunch of stuff. It's like the idea of marrying a doctor. You want to marry a guy who works like, who could potentially be, a surgeon more so. He could be working at any time, for any amount of hours. He's probably tired most of the time. He doesn't want to deal with you, doesn't want to deal with anything. He makes a lot of money, but his life is his work. The reality of these things is kind of impractical. It's kind of, the fantasy is impractical. So the idea is, we have monogamy to create a stable society and village and such, and people are probably a lot happier with, monogamy with a person who's very similar to them, who just say, if you grew up with that person and you knew them throughout your entire life, it's the childhood friend route in a visual novel or an anime, right? And I think that's a good thing, the whole childhood friend thing, because you're so familiar with them. And this is the interesting thing. A childhood friend becomes like a sister or a brother, where you a lot of the time people don't feel like sexual attraction. Maybe once they start to develop sexually, after puberty and such, they do. But before that, it's like, if you are constantly around a person as a child, you will kind of perceive them as like a sibling or almost like a cousin or something. There's that interesting familial bond which you have, which is a very stable. It's like, if you have a fight, you're going to be all right. You're going to get over it. If you maybe spend a bit of time away and then you come back, then you're like, you're still close and friends and all that, and you just feel like there are like, I know people who from my childhood who they're like, it's like they're brothers from another mother, because I've grew up with them. And I think that's healthy. And I think if you marry someone who is like that, that is going to be the healthiest, the most stable, the best. You're going to both be the happiest, even if as a woman you don't get the guy who's a turbo chad, plower of women, fucking whatever title you want to give it. Or even as a man, if you don't get like, 10 women in your harem, right? You're going to be much more happy with someone you grew up with, someone who is very genetically similar to you, who's, had the same kind of experience, right? And that's what we're lacking. That's what we it's like almost after the early 2000s, because I can still remember a time when that was a thing, when it was like, and I think women are the protectors of this. Women are the creators of community and family and society and such, right? Or well, they do socially, they do it. Men make the infrastructure, men protect it, men get the food and all that for it to function. But women are because it was always like, your mother would have a group of women who were kind of like I wouldn't say quite, well, maybe friends, but just kind of like they were there because of, location, really. A lot of it's due to just being locational around you. And, they were similar racially, right? And you would talk to their children and hang out with them as a kid, right? And then you grew up together and you got older and you would maybe go to the same high school or whatever. And what's meant to happen is you marry, one of those people, right? And you have your own children, you make your own communities, and you're still friends with everyone else, all the other kids that grew up into adults, and now you're friends with them. They all have their own kids, and they all, married in these communities, and it's like stable and proper, and everyone is happy. There's a certain level of happiness. Again, people didn't get what they, what it's like the highest level of biology wasn't satisfied, but it was, by that I mean, the urge to conquer an entire country as a man, that wasn't satisfied, but you did fulfill your, desires for stability and family and all this kind of stuff. But that was broken. I noticed that broke. Families divorced. Divorce became normalized. I don't know when. I assume I've seen back to like the 90s, things were kind of, troublesome, but really in the 2000s, all this stuff was normalized. And a lot of the time I noticed the immigrants who came over and had families, they're not divorced because they needed to keep together. It's more the third generational immigrants or the later, whatever, they kind of divorced. And all this stuff was normalized, the idea of like hating a neighbor is not a good thing, it's not good if you have bad neighbors. And people are less and less wanting to be kind of good neighbors. Like, you live meters away from someone who you don't know or you hate, or it's like, that's not healthy. Of course, I don't think living meters away from a bunch of strangers is like healthy at all, you know. Again, it's the idea that the village was more healthy. Even if you did live close to people, you kind of knew them and they were family. As I said, when you grow up with people as a kid, you just see them like family. You just see them like a brother, a sister, a cousin. I guess that's kind of weird. That's why it's kind of weird to like maybe fuck someone or marry someone when they're like that. But I don't know. I'm sure the sex is better when you have that kind of, you know, when you marry someone who you have been to like almost like a family with for ages. So it's probably a lot more, what would you say, comfort, and it's just like, you know, after that you'd just be making dinner, or you'd just be, you know, talking as normal or whatever. I don't know. Instead of like two people who come from opposite sides of the earth, who have no cultural or even maybe language connection, who haven't seen each other for a long enough time, and then it's like you really don't know that person. You're just kind of using them almost. Either way, I think that's why we're so fucked up, is that multiculturalism doesn't really work. You can kind of have some cultures, like, you know, Asian people together with Asian people, like European people together with European people, black people together with black people. But even then, there's a reason why European countries next to each other would fight, or African tribes next to each other would fight, and like China, you know, you look at the history of China, and you know, China's a giant region full of countries which are constantly fighting each other. There's a reason why even that it works, it's if you live in that's the thing I really hate about living in a, like, what would you call it, you know, one of these further kind of countries, things like Australia, Canada, and America, and I guess New Zealand. I wouldn't include England, because England, you know, has such a long cultural background, and it really is, you know, it is the birthplace of the English, of the native English, right? But places like America and Australia and Canada, these places, these immigrants, I guess South America South Africa to an extent, these places are like a mishmash of all these different immigrants, Europeans and now Chinese, and the Chinese actually came pretty early, and now, like, you know, blacks and Indians, and it's like these places are representations of the world, where, you know, the world is mostly Chinese and Indian, and these countries are becoming mostly Chinese and Indian with like a bit of black, and then a bit of white, and a bit of, you know, whatever other mismatch kind of culture. And I don't like that, because it's so difficult to find people that look like you. And it's just, everyone's kind of tense, and everyone's kind of at odds, and it's like there's no... And they're trying to make like this mulatto, you know, by mulatto I'm talking about like mixed race. I should probably use that word. They're making like a mixed race, you know, like that one South Park episode where everyone's just this brown kind of Mexican looking ambiguous creature. But it's like I don't want to marry a racially ambiguous, rootless being. I don't want my children to, you know, I don't want to turn into that. I don't want my children to turn into that. It's just so it's nasty, and that's what these kind of first world Western countries, or from Western, you know, from Europe, I guess they were made from Europe. That's what these countries are turning into, and I just don't think it's a good thing. Anyway, I'll leave it with that. Yeah. Check the links in the description for social and commercial stuff, and have a nice day.
So it's interesting to look at Africa, and especially if you can find like YouTubers or social media people from Africa, because they show you the development of the country. And of course, I'm more talking about central and vaguely central south and central north. All right, so to really understand Africa, you have to look at it from the point where the North Africa is essentially more Arabic. It's not really what you think of as, the black people, so to speak. They're more very mixed in with Arabs. While the South is more so where the Afrikaners, the white people, settled in. So the kind of central areas are mostly the untouched areas. I would imagine that's where they have the lowest amount of infrastructure. And if you watch these videos, you'll see the Africans trying to learn to build up the infrastructure. And usually it's one person who maybe you can think they're a little more exceptional than the rest. They're a little bit more intelligent, and they're guiding everyone in the village and helping them out. Assuming this isn't just some charity fund where people from another country, help them. So they're learning to build the infrastructure, and infrastructure you can really just simply think of as stuff like houses and buildings, for example, shop buildings, roads, and utilities. So water, anything to do with water is in the toilets and the bathrooms, the pipes, gas pipes or electrical systems, for example. So all of these things, is essentially your infrastructure. And in Western, which essentially just means white countries, when you say Western, you're really just meaning Western European or white people, white countries. These countries have good infrastructure. If you live in one, they have good infrastructure. They have usually some potholes everywhere, but usually they have good roads. Usually they have good buildings. They have running water, these systems that you could say we take for granted. If you went to somewhere like the rural areas of India or maybe even China, who knows? Though China is, more advanced than, places like Africa or India, you'd think. So, if you look at, white people conquered the world a couple hundred years ago, essentially. And that you'll have to look into the English and the French and the Spanish and such, and you'll see that like Mexico and basically all of Southern America, Argentina, Chile, etc., they speak Spanish, right? Why do they speak Spanish? Why is their food influenced by Spanish culture? Why is it, like we think, Mexican, that's where the Spanish language comes from, but no, it's from Spain. And I imagine, Portuguese is similar ethnically and such as well, but it's from Spain. The Spanish, which are, you call them Southern Europeans, kind of conquered this Southern American land, right? And then influenced them, gave them, their versions of Christianity and all this, and their language and such, and also advanced their infrastructure to an extent. You probably know China is investing heavily into Africa, as infrastructurally. So, firstly, it was France and England, and I think Holland, and a couple of other European countries that went over to Africa and made their colonies. It's the reason why certain African countries speak French or they speak English, why they are Christian, some of them are, is because of this, basically white European people coming over and conquering and giving them this infrastructure, this language and such. And you might think, like, is this good or bad? I mean, I'm not really debating ethics here. I'm more just discussing what is. But my point is, this video is not about Africa, and it's not about conquering, it's not about any of that stuff. It's about the idea that the reason why the white people could just conquer the entire world is that they had technology, they had guns, they had better technology. It's like the idea of how did the Mongolians conquer China and Central Asia and all these places? It's because they were physically very strong, and they were 6 foot tall or something, I think. And they're big, strong people. And then they figured out that you sit on a horse and you fire up arrows and no one can really do anything to you. Do you know how annoying ranged attacks are? Unless you're a good archer, you're not really doing a whole lot. It's the same way, even if your tribe had bows and spears, you've got a bunch of guys with rifles and they shoot at you, and they get a good shot, you're going to get mostly destroyed. I'm not saying you can't fight against technology. There's definitely been many cases of it. And a bullet's not going to put down everyone, but in general, technology conquered. And to get better technology, you have to have better infrastructure. The reason why I can make this video, even though I don't have exceptional wealth in this country, I'm not exceptionally privileged, I don't come from an upper class upbringing or anything like that. But yet I have the technology to make a video to talk to you, is because the infrastructure where I live it's actually kind of shit. At least for a Western country, but it's good enough to the point where I can do this, where I have electricity that most of the time is fine, where I've got a computer that works good, and I've got internet and all this stuff that I can make this video. So you can think that the Industrial Revolutions, if you look at maybe we'll look at England and France, they industrialized very quickly. They had factories, right? And they had running water. You can look at 18th century, they had running water in factories, and heat, they could heat the houses and do all this. They could control the elements to a better way, because you've got to understand, infrastructure is just controlling the elements. A road is just a perfect flat, physical thing. A house is just a box, essentially, a physical, again, the earth, it's the earth element. Water utilities, a shower, a sink, a tap, it's just you controlling the water. You want to cook, you need fire, you control fire, heat somehow to cook your food. It's just better control of the elements outside of you. Eventually, when you say England, I think they tried to go to China or something. I forget how. I don't know much history, but and then they kind of passed the infrastructure over, and Japan also advanced this infrastructure fairly quickly, right? And then they would have had more advanced things. Eventually China got the telephone and the TV and the computer and all this stuff, and it advanced rapidly. Also because they have a lot of people working together, so that's going to make it a lot quicker. But point being is that they have the technology, right? And most of us we have running water. We have, you can get a gas stove or an electric stove. We can produce heat. You can probably go to a grocery store or a hardware store. We've got all these luxuries and these things, right? And it's not like they don't have that in, third world countries or something, but it's not quite as built up. The people probably don't know how to utilize the resources as much or as well. And usually what happens, it's like a spring. So from the top, you think from the European countries, we design, develop, and engineer all this stuff, and then it slowly goes down to all the other countries. So that's why you see, you go to Africa and it's like you go to a hardware store there and there's this, cement powder that you have in a hardware store in America, probably the same brand maybe. It's why you have like a McDonald's or a KFC or, something like that in Africa, in a city, right? It's the rain has come down to the ground, which you can think that's because the Africa is like the center of it's the resource country of the world. It's got all the gold and oil and coal and gems and ore you could ever imagine, and that's like its power. That's its, you can think it's the root, it's the earth, the foundation. Well, the white European, especially the really, like those hyper intelligent northerners, where you get to places like Finland and Sweden and England, to an extent Germany, France as well. So that's getting a little more southern, and parts of Russia. Why are these people so intelligent? Why are the best programmers always the Russians? And why are some of the best engineers like German and such? It's because these people, white Northern European people, represent the mind, the head, the ability to think. People represent, on a spectrum, we represent different archetypal forces, meaning like different elements, air, earth, fire, water, ether, etc. I think it's like an RTS game, a strategy game. If you play like Warcraft 3, you build a gold mine, and then you start getting more gold, and you send a bunch of your peons to chop down the woods, and you start getting a bunch of wood, and then you start investing that into like more houses or more armories, to get more guys, to conquer more land, to get more resources, to build more buildings, to upgrade the buildings, to get more resources, etc., etc. It just keeps going on. We in our lives, ourselves, we need to improve ourselves to get stronger and healthier and richer and smarter and learn more things, and and get a better network, and learn the society and the buildings and the shops and all these, understand the physics of the world and such, so that we can make a better family and make a better society and community and make a better country. And maybe if you have a company, you want to you make lots of money and you invest it into developing a new product or a new thing to improve your product, and then you make more money because you have a better product. And because you have a really nice product, that makes your country stronger and better and more prosperous. And it makes your people more healthy and strong and better. Assumably, you could go the other way, make them more sick and horrible and weak and, all this stuff. And then if you're like a leader of a country, you want to invest properly into different things. You invest into cleaning the country up and strengthening the borders, so then the people have less stress, right? And then you invest into, improving the railways or something, or just the general infrastructure, and then things go quicker and you have better transportation and better, the resources. It's like, do you get what I'm saying? Then you are the centerpiece, and then the family is the larger piece in the society, and then the community, and you invest into things, and then your group invests into things, and it gets better. It's like, again, if we take it back to looking at like Africa or places like India and these places with shit infrastructure, you got one person who's smart and watches a bunch of YouTube videos and then thinks, hey, I could improve my community. We're all living in here in essentially mud brick huts that leak, and no one's got any power. We have to go to the local community center. How about we start learning how to make our own bricks and mortar, and maybe we try to buy some mortar and bricks. How do you make a roof? Let's get better roofs for the buildings. It's like, all right, now our houses are good. Let's try to get some solar panels and make a well. Now we have water and electricity. Let's switch over from burning wood and coal to, electrical cooking, or get a few gas tanks or something. It's like, all right, now we've released the stress, and it's going to lead. Once you satisfy the foundation to a certain point, it's going to lead to social changes, because now people they don't have to do as much. They don't have to hunt and chop up a bunch of wood to cook, and now they have more free time, and you have to manage that. So you have to manage the next level. Like if you play the game Civilization, it's like technology levels. You go from the Stone Age to a higher level, but of course it changes people and it changes the game. The same way in the West here now, younger people are in disarray, relationships are in disarray. People are figuring out that open relationships don't work. Maybe the ways of old worked better. The idea of arranged marriages functionally was better for society. And we're socially figuring that out because we have so much freedom and so much ability to do things, though admittedly it's kind of closing in on itself and constricting. The point being is that people are exploring things. They're like, oh, look at all these drugs, maybe try those out, and then they find out, oh, no, maybe not so good, not good for you. Or it's like, hey, let's live a non-stable life. Let's, what if I just travel and enjoy myself all the time? And then they lose all their money and they figure out, oh well, the world's not all that interesting, to be honest, and then they come back to it. They come back to a point of stability. So in the West, we're kind of using the stability of the infrastructure we have, because everything's so built up, and it's I guess you would say easy to survive, though of course I've been poor to an extent where I know you can eat. I know what you can eat outside, I'll put it that way. So it's not always easy to survive in a Western country, especially when you can't get a job or any money, because there's so much competition now because of all the immigration and shipping way of labor. But point being is that a lot of people who are more fortunate, who do have that infrastructure, maybe a more supportive family, if they weren't raised properly, are kind of wasting their lives away exploring. Really just look at what are university students and what are kind of young, richish liberal people. It's like Tinder was created for young rich university students. Facebook was created for, again, the same kinds of people. These big tech jobs and all this stuff, this is more for these people who are at the peak of wealth, and so much is they're standing on so much stability, but they haven't built it up themselves. It's the difference of, if you build your own house, you're going to take it very seriously. If you build up your own infrastructure, you're going to take it seriously. And if you don't have a house, if you don't have infrastructure, you're not going to be dicking around on your phone, or taking drugs, or being out there, having casual relationships and such, because you're going to be building a house. You're going to be trying to catch fish in a river, or learning which grasses and leaves you can eat, if you get what I mean. So humans go through this level of development where we start off as basically what you look at the Africans, people don't really want to admit this, but they are 1,000 years behind almost, and that's kind of archetypally how they will remain in a way. You'll have to figure out what I mean by that out. It's kind of like if you took a white guy and you put him in Africa, he'll figure out how to dictate and manage, and he'll be living in a paradise, in a mansion, and around him will be a great garden, a great society. But if you take an African, you put him in a white country, he'll probably live in a slum on welfare. So, what I'm saying is people throughout history will evolve, and our tech levels evolve. We've gotten to a fairly advanced level now where we have essentially we've unlocked all the elements. Once you get to electricity, electromagnetism, that is the fifth element, and then you recycle again. To the point where our infrastructure will get better, our taps and sinks, and how many people have to wait for hot water to you got to run your sink for hot water? That's an inconvenience. why can't it just be instant? And it is for, rich people have instant hot water because they have systems, they have water purifiers, right? They probably don't have gas stoves anymore. Like, who has a janky gas stove? I gotta get a lighter and fucking, light the stove. And half the time, some of the time, it just, the wind will blow it out, right? It's not a very efficient system. What I'm saying is things will get easier and better. 3D printing will lead into, being able to print your own material goods. And the more you satisfy the material needs, which is hunger, housing, thirst, technically desire for sex, then you move up to the next level, and which is more, you start getting into like ego and pleasure and like, who am I, and how do I fit in with the world, and then you get into family and such. So it's like technology levels represent that, which is why places like India and Africa are so family orientated, while in the West we're not. We're very like isolated, which is kind of not very good. Of course, even though when people are on their phones and such, they're probably talking to other people or looking at other people. So we're connected, just in an isolated form, an isolated way. So the lower you are in the spectrum of the pyramid, as well as the technology level, the more communal, like the whole country is a family, you can think. Well, the higher you get to this, instead of society being a family, it's just your little tribe. Instead of your little tribe, it's just your little family. Instead of your little family, it's just you and maybe one person of your family. And then eventually it's just you, who is, the individual. So it's a spectrum of individual to family to society and to the world. I guess globalism in that sense is like the lowest, I don't know what you would say, lowest common denominator, lowest something or other. It's trying to get us to all be black, I guess, in a philosophical sense. I don't know, something like that. Do I really get my point across? Look, I don't know. You got to think of it like, if you got put on an island, like, go watch Dr. Stone, and you get put on an island, what do? You need to eat. You're in root chakra mode. You need to eat. You need to figure out a safe place to sleep away from predators. People talk about like, women not allowed to leave the society or house, because they get eaten by a bear. That's an interesting thing about all this, about getting to feminism. Not that this video is about that at all, but the world was a dangerous place, and if you live in a shithole society, it still is. The reason why women were protected and not really allowed to, I wouldn't say they weren't allowed, but you know what I mean, is because the world was a very dangerous place, and in some places still is. So actually, one interesting thing is, the more freedom women have is actually a direct link to how advanced your society and technology and such is. In the white countries, we're a lot more advanced, which is why women can, well, I don't want to say safely walk the streets. I've seen some shit, I'll put it that way. But maybe if you live in an upper, at least a middle class city, they should be able to, safely walk the streets. At least it's a lot more safe than, a third world country, I would assume. Though, mind you, there are some of those reports where it's like women saying they're afraid to walk around. Was it Dublin? That's because of the immigration, so it's a whole other issue. But you could analyze that yourself if you want to. Point being, when women are more free, it's a more advanced society. And also, men get more restricted because men thrive in chaos almost. Men create order, but they thrive in You throw a man on an island, a desert island, and he will conquer the island, right? Throw a woman on a desert island and... not desert island, excuse me. Not many resources there, just an island. You throw a woman on an island and she won't really know what to do. Women aren't wired that way. They're wired to be in a society that is more built up. So women thrive in this more, technically the white societies, the white cultures, they thrive there. But the trade-off is that they're less family. These white, advanced societies become less family orientated. Now, is it because we've been culturally manipulated by Jews? Is that why we are less family orientated in the West? Because if you look back a couple, 100 years, we were a lot more family orientated. I don't know. That's one interesting thing. Of course, we're going to have to head back to a point where things are more family orientated, because otherwise society is just going to fall apart. So, yeah, that's an interesting thing. But as I said, I guess it's different powers, different abilities in different societies. You probably get the idea. It's all a spectrum, and it's like related to time and speed. If you could just 3D print something, you don't have to go to the shops, and you can do it in like 10 seconds. You got like a super fast 3D printer. You've saved yourself an hour maybe, or half an hour. You've sped reality up. And technology is speeding reality up to a point where we hit the singularity, and eventually you're just kind of like playing full dive VR, porn games. If anyone's played custom made 3D, you're essentially in like an MMO where you're, it's like Sword Art Online cross custom made 3D. You've got the perfect woman or man, right in front of you, and you're hooked into this virtual experience, and you can do whatever you want. It's just like being in your imagination, except it's virtually real, maybe you want to say, and that is like the singularity of that's like the crown jewel of the imaginary level, which is a 6th level, which is related to your 3rd eye. You see, the 5th level is the phones and radio and basic Commodore 64 computers, right? That was the technology level. And basically that like cocaine 80s businessman 2 phones type thing was like the crown jewel of that. That was like the experience. And then the 7th level is the ultimate like merging of everything, which funny enough is the opposite, because we will all create our own individual world. I think that's when people start to figure out that they are like a powerful being, and we no longer have the government anymore, and you just start making your own country and world. And we have like hypertech and 3D print islands if you want, and people just, maybe it becomes more anachronistic and like libertarian-esque, and that comes after the full dive VR, hooking yourself into the machine type thing. And then we recycle, because once you hit the max level, you prestige and go back to level 1, except with all of your stuff, right? Anyway, that about wraps it up. Of course, check the links in the description if you want social and commercial stuff, and have a good day.